Hi, welcome to Voices Evoses. Are you learning English? Great. And do you love myths? Then get ready for our Myths, Curses, and Folklore series. Today's Learn English Through story is a graded reader about Bastet, the Egyptian goddess of women and cats. In ancient Egypt, people believed in many gods. Bastet was a powerful goddess. She protected women and cats. But in this story, a modern man learns you should not play with gods. In modern life, what happens if you make a goddess angry? Be careful. If you anger a god, they punish you in their own way. Let's begin Ethan's story. It's mysterious and unforgettable.
The sky was grey. It was quiet. It felt like the sky was not breathing. Ethan walked slowly. His shoes touched the hard floor with light sounds. The hallway echoed, but the office was silent. The windows were foggy. You couldn't see outside. The rain was soft but never stopped. The office building was new, but inside there was an old smell dust, coffee, paper, and something unknown. Ethan opened the door. It seemed like no one was there. He sat in his chair, turned on the computer, and switched on the desk lamp. The light was pale and shaky. A small shadow danced on the wall. There was a cup on the desk. It wasn't there yesterday. No one had put it there. The cup was black. It had a golden cat image on it. The cat's eyes were green. They were shining. Ethan looked at the cup, then turned his head away. He chose not to care. The computer turned on. The screen stayed white for a few seconds. Then he opened Twitter and started typing. His fingers moved slowly, but the words were clear. Women should give birth naturally. C-sections are the easy way. A woman's body can do this. The tweet was sent. But then something in the room changed. The temperature dropped. The keyboard felt cold. The screen turned pale. A cat sound was heard. It came from far away, like from inside the walls. Ethan stopped. He listened, then shook his head. Nonsense, he said to himself. But the cup was still there, and those golden eyes now looked more focused. It was evening. The sky was still grey. Ethan got off the metro and walked to his home. The streets were quiet. Cars moved slowly. People avoided eye contact. He entered his building. He didn't take the elevator. As always, he used the stairs. He entered his apartment. The door creaked. The lights were dim. The living room was silent. The walls were black. The carpet was grey, and the couch was dark blue. Ethan took off his jacket and dropped it on the couch. He removed his shoes and stepped on the carpet. One corner of the carpet was yellow. A very small spot, like sunlight had touched it. But there was no sun outside. Ethan didn't notice. He drank water in the kitchen. The glass was clear, but when he looked inside, the bottom was slightly blue. Ethan didn't care. He was just tired. The living room lamp flickered. The light hit the wall. The wall's shadow turned a little green. But Ethan was looking at his phone. He didn't see it. He was still reading comments on his tweet. They were all angry, but Ethan didn't care. Women don't understand, he said to himself, and he laughed. At that moment, there was a sound from the kitchen. Something like glass made a soft noise. It didn't sound like a cat, but he couldn't tell what it was. Ethan turned his head. There was a pillow on the couch. It used to be black. Now there was a thin red line in the middle. very small, hard to see. But it was there. Ethan squinted. He paused for a second, then shook his head. "My eyes are playing tricks," he said, and he turned on the TV. Ethan fell asleep on the couch. The TV was on, but there was no sound. A blue light on the screen blinked again and again. It touched his face. Light and dark mixed in the room. The house was quiet, but it felt like something was walking, far away, slowly. The night was long. In his dream, there was something. A cat. Its eyes were green. But Ethan did not remember it in the morning. He woke up. His head felt heavy. He looked at his phone. It was 7:30. He rubbed his eyes and stood up. He walked to the kitchen to make coffee. The cups in the cupboard were in place, but one was all blue. Ethan did not see it. He picked the black one, like always, but it was not really black. It was blue, painted black. He drank his coffee and turned on his computer. Before work, he opened Twitter. His tweet had many comments. Some people were angry. Some made jokes. But Ethan kept answering. Women should not fear pain. Their bodies are made for birth. Natural birth is the real way. The screen was bright. The words looked bigger. More comments came. Ethan could not read them all, but he kept writing. Doctors chose the easy way. I don't hate women. I tell the truth. This is not science. It's emotion. On the desk, his notebook looked strange. The cover used to be grey. Now it was dark red. But Ethan did not see it. The meeting had started. Ethan was sitting next to the boss, just like always. The boss was an older man with experience. Everyone was focused, and the conversation was moving forward. Suddenly, a young woman from the office, Clara, started to speak. Ethan looked at her from the corner of his eye and smiled in a sarcastic way. Clara was trying to defend the project. Her voice was shaking, and she paused between her words. Ethan raised his eyebrows and spoke again. "You're leading this project? Then it must have a very strong strategy," he said, smiling. Clara hesitated for a moment, then nodded and continued. But Ethan didn't believe women could think as clearly as men when making decisions. They always start to focus on emotions, he thought. So he ignored Clara's ideas and created his own solution in his mind. When Ethan stepped outside for lunch, he saw another worker. She was holding a file in her hands. Her glasses were a little crooked. She looked tired and stressed. Ethan gave her a quick look and nodded slightly. "Still working on that file? I could finish it easily," he said. The woman frowned. Her eyes looked surprised for a second, but Ethan continued. "If you were a man, you would have finished it by now," he said. The woman said nothing. She just nodded and walked away quickly. Ethan didn't care if she was tired or upset. He only wanted the work to be done well, and he believed women usually couldn't think at that level. He saw this as more proof that he was better than them. It was dark when Ethan left the office. There was a soft wind outside, but he forgot to wear his jacket. He went home, opened the door, and walked inside. Everything looked normal in the house. Everything was in the right place. But something felt strange. The colors were a little brighter. The blue corner of the carpet was yellow now. But Ethan didn't notice. To him, nothing had changed. Still, his eyes looked more tired than before. He walked around the room with no purpose for a few minutes. Then he turned on the TV and started changing channels. The same silly ads and cooking shows were still on, but the colors on the screen were more intense. There was a red glow on the TV. He didn't see it. He squinted a little, but only kept changing channels. The TV sounds seemed louder than usual, but he didn't care. After some time, Ethan turned off the TV and leaned back on the couch. His eyes were getting heavy. There were red tones on the white walls, colors he had never noticed before. But he still didn't see anything strange. He looked around one more time from where he sat. Then he closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Nothing was wrong. Everything was still the same. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. Morning light was coming into the bedroom. But something was different. The shadows on the walls had new shapes. It looked like the walls were moving a little. At first, he thought it was normal. His eyes were still sleepy. Then he looked at the headboard and tried to understand what had changed. This was not the same room anymore. The colors were too bright. The white pillows were now green. One corner of the blanket had a purple burst, like a color had exploded there. Ethan took a deep breath and rubbed his eyes, but the room was still full of moving colors. This must be a joke, he thought, but he wasn't sure of his own voice. He got up, but when he walked, his feet moved strangely. Bright yellow, red, and blue colors started to appear on the carpet. The room looked like a painting. Everything felt unreal. His head started to spin. The room disappeared, but the colors stayed bright and strange. "What's happening?" he whispered, and held his head. He tried to walk to the kitchen. He quickly moved toward the bathroom. He held the sink and bent down. His vision became dark. The feeling in his stomach was getting worse. He entered the bathroom slowly. He felt lost for a moment. His body was shaking, and everything felt out of control. His mind was working fast, but thinking made it harder. For a moment, I thought I had control, he thought. But now, everything was falling apart. It felt like a shock. He bent down and started to vomit. When Ethan woke up the next morning, the sickness was still there. Something felt wrong. His mind was full of strange thoughts. "I think I'm poisoned," he said to himself. He got up slowly and went to drink water, but it didn't help. His stomach was still turning. He quickly got dressed and decided to go to the hospital. When he opened the hospital door, everything looked normal. White walls, bright lights, cold and quiet, like always. But Ethan couldn't understand the strange feeling inside him. A nurse welcomed him in the room. "The doctor is waiting for you," she said, and let him in. The doctor looked at Ethan through his glasses. "What's the problem?" he asked. Ethan looked a bit afraid. "I feel sick. My stomach. It started last night and still won't stop. Maybe I'm poisoned," he said. The doctor nodded and took some notes. "We need to understand what's going on. Let's do some tests," he said. Ethan felt a little better, but his mind was still full of worry. They took some tests, blood, urine, but something felt strange. The test results took longer than normal. While Ethan waited, he felt something was wrong, but he still didn't know what it was. The doctor looked at Ethan and said, "We need to do an ultrasound." Ethan was surprised, but said yes. "Okay. What will happen now?" he asked, slowly. The nurse put some gel on his stomach and placed the device. The doctor stayed quiet while watching the screen. Ethan felt nervous, but didn't say anything. After a while, the doctor looked up at him and spoke seriously. "Mr. Ethan, you are pregnant." Ethan froze. "What?" he said. His eyes grew wide. He didn't understand. How is that possible?" he asked. The doctor moved his shoulders a little and said again, "Yes, you are pregnant." Ethan couldn't understand what the doctor had said. His body suddenly felt heavy. His eyes got dark. The world started to spin. He felt like everything was wrong. It felt like a nightmare. At that moment, Ethan thought everything in his life was falling apart. He walked out of the hospital, but his mind was full of questions. Everything felt strange. But one thing was clear. His life would never be the same again. Ethan left the hospital. He felt confused. Something inside him was wrong, but he couldn't say what. He had taken time off from work, so he went home. As he opened the door, he hoped everything would feel normal again. But the house was different. The colors. This was not the place he knew. The walls, the floor, the carpets. Everything looked strange. Things were more colorful, more alive. In the corner of the living room, there was a yellow part on the carpet. It was always there, but now it was brighter. Ethan looked down and noticed the yellow more clearly. That was strange. But his eyes still couldn't see things right. He walked slowly into the room and stopped. He saw a photo in a frame. The person in the photo looked familiar, but not really. Something felt wrong. Ethan took one more step. Suddenly, the colors in the room changed again. There was something in the air. Blue, green, red, all very bright. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. But the colors did not go away. His head began to spin. He had no energy to take another step. A loud ringing started in his head. His breath got fast, and his heart beat hard. He leaned against the wall, but the colors were still dancing around him. Then everything went blurry. It felt like his brain was about to explode. One thought stayed in his mind. This is not possible. But no matter what he did, the colors didn't stop. Before his eyes went dark, Ethan understood. Nothing in the house was right anymore. Then his eyes closed, and he fainted. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. At first, everything was dark, but then the room started to take shape. He had a light headache, but the shock he felt was stronger. The first thing he noticed was his belly. It was never this big before. Now there was a round shape in the middle. He rubbed his eyes for a second, but it was still there. It was real. "What am I going to do?" he whispered. He closed his eyes and shook his head. This must be a joke, or a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Suddenly, he had a strong craving for sushi. He had never eaten sushi in his life, but now he couldn't stop thinking about it. Sushi. Only sushi. He wanted it so much that everything else disappeared. He imagined a restaurant by the river, a plate of sushi, fresh fish. All his thoughts were about sushi now. He forgot everything. His stomach, his body, the colors, the doctor. Nothing else mattered. Only sushi. He wanted to forget the chaos and think about one thing only. Sushi. Ethan grabbed his phone and quickly opened a food app. He looked at the sushi menu, and his mouth started to water. Now there was nothing else in his head. Just cold, fresh sushi. He placed his order fast. It came so quickly, he didn't even notice how fast. He felt a little strange inside, but the sushi made him forget that feeling. After a while, the doorbell rang. Ethan rushed to open the door. A young man was standing there, holding a sushi box. His name was Leo. Ethan looked at Leo for a moment in a strange way, but he didn't notice anything special. When Leo gave him the sushi box, he paused for a second. Something passed through his mind. This city is full of strange things, he thought. Curses, demons, and now a pregnant man. Ethan opened the box and saw the sushi. His heart started to beat faster, but his thoughts didn't change. He still had only one thing in his mind: sushi. Weeks went by. Ethan's belly grew bigger and bigger. He couldn't bend to tie his shoes anymore. He got tired just from walking. He didn't go out much. When he had to go outside, he wore the biggest and darkest clothes he had. A big hooded coat, a large sweater, and pants that hid his body, but his belly was too big to hide now. One day, while looking in the mirror, he whispered, "What am I going to do?" He started searching the internet. Stomach swelling in men. Why is my belly growing? Pregnancy signs for men. Then he found a strange name on a medical forum. Dr. Bastet, a mysterious doctor who mixed old medicine with modern science. She helped with very special cases. There was contact information. Ethan quickly made an appointment. A few days later, Ethan walked into a small clinic. It had dim lights and the smell of incense. There were old writings and cat statues on the walls. Something felt strange, but he couldn't explain why. Then Dr. Bastet entered. Ethan had to squint his eyes because of the light. She looked almost unreal. Her skin had a gold shine. Her eyes glowed like a cat's, but her voice was soft. The checkup started. Ethan was sure the doctor knew something. After a while, Bastet closed the file and looked at Ethan. She spoke in a slow, calm voice. "Ethan, your baby looks healthy, but for the birth, there are 2 options." Ethan opened his mouth but said nothing. He just stared. Bastet continued, "You can give birth naturally, but for that, a gender-related surgery is needed. Vaginal surgery. It means removing your penis." She paused for a moment. "Or we can do a C-section. It is more controlled, but the healing takes longer." Ethan's face turned pale. His hands started to shake. He almost stood up, but his head felt dizzy, so he sat down again. The room was silent. Only Ethan's short, heavy breaths could be heard. The white lights hurt his eyes. Sweat ran down his forehead. Bastet was next to him. She held his hand. Her hand was cold and strong, but her touch felt strange and safe. Ethan couldn't speak anymore. His eyes were dark, and he couldn't breathe well. Everything looked blurry. One last scream, one last shake, and then silence. Then a baby's cry filled the room. It was loud, clear, and full of life. Tears came from Ethan's eyes. Bastet held the baby in her arms. She looked at him, then turned to Ethan. "It's a boy," she said. Her voice was still soft, but now deeper, more sacred. "And he is healthy." Bastet came closer, and placed the baby into Ethan's arms. Ethan looked at his child with surprise, fear, and a strange peace. For the first time, he was truly quiet. Then Bastet took out an old necklace from her pocket. It was small and handmade. In the center, there was a figure of a woman with the head of a cat. "This," Bastet said, "carries the wisdom, patience, and strength of women."